In the food court of a suburban California mall, an 85-year-old man with a slow gait and quiet eyes was about to be humiliated by a group of restless teens. What started as a peaceful afternoon of people watching and sipping coffee took a shocking turn when they came face to face with him. Frank Delaney wasn't your typical retiree. For over 6 decades, he had lived with the discipline of a former Marine, once revered as Ironback during his service in the Pacific. Known for his unwavering loyalty and quiet dignity, he had seen war and endured peace. When the teens knocked over his cane and shoved him to the floor, laughing as they filmed him, they had no idea they were igniting something much bigger. Delaney didn't scream. He didn't threaten. He simply made a quiet call that would lead to a homecoming the mall wasn't ready for. What began as an act of cruelty against one man would become a rallying cry. The shopping center, once indifferent, anonymous, would never be the same after 20 former Marines marched in, shoulder to shoulder, not in vengeance but in solidarity. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The hum of Westfield Shopping Mall's late afternoon crowd blended into a kind of white noise as Harold "Gunny" Sullivan took his usual seat near the food court windows. The polished tiles, the faint smell of cinnamon rolls, and the rhythmic chatter of teenagers passing by had become a familiar landscape, background to his solitary routine. Every Wednesday, like clockwork, he came here, black coffee in one hand, folded newspaper in the other, military cap centered perfectly above his brow. No ceremony, no grand gestures, just a quiet hour of observance, stillness, and a kind of unspoken salute to the years behind him. Today was no different, until it was. He hadn't noticed them at first, not until a sharp cackle broke through the ambient noise. A cluster of boys, 3, maybe 4, hovered by the pretzel stand, all swagger and elbows, the leader standing out with his loud voice and 2 big sneakers, Danny Rodriguez. The name meant nothing to Harold yet, but the boy's eyes told him everything, coiled tension looking for release. His voice rang out, "Yo, check out GI Grandpa. Got enough medals there, old man?" A ripple of laughter followed, though it didn't reach Harold. He unfolded his paper, but a moment later the boy's sneakers squeaked closer. "Bet you fought the dinosaurs, huh?" Harold raised his eyes slowly. "Language," he said, evenly, nodding toward a nearby table where a mother fed her toddler in a high chair. Danny tilted his head. "What, you own the mall now?" "No," Harold replied, voice calm but firm, "but I believe in showing respect in public spaces." Danny's smile was all venom. "Man, you gonna make me respect you?" Another chuckle from his friends. Harold could have ignored it, could have looked away, but that's not what he was made of. "Earned respect and given respect aren't the same," he said, folding his paper neatly. Danny stepped forward. "Say that again?" Harold stood, steady despite the creak of his joints. The mall lights glinted off the eagle and globe insignia on his cap. He looked Danny square in the eye. "I said speak like a man, not a child playing gangster." There was a flicker in Danny's face, something small, wounded, flaring up like a defensive animal. Then the blow came. It was a shove at first, too quick for Harold to react, and the chair behind him tipped over with a metallic clatter. He stumbled, caught himself, but a foot swept under his shin, and he was down, on the ground, elbows scraping tile, cap knocked. Sideways, laughter erupted. A sneaker caught his side, then another. "Get his phone," someone said. "Bet he's got a flip phone like a fossil." Shoppers turned. Some gasped, some recorded, some walked away. From the perimeter, Sarah Martinez watched the commotion unfold in horror. The security supervisor, on duty after extending her shift to cover a co-worker, had just left the admin office when she heard the first jeers. By the time she reached the food court, the scene had already begun. Her hand went instinctively to her walkie, but her instincts, sharpened from a decade of being a military spouse, drove her forward first. "Hey! Back off!" The teens scattered as she rushed toward the fallen man. Her voice cut sharp through the mall's din, drawing the attention of a few nearby patrons. One boy hesitated, the one with the orange hoodie, Danny. He met Sarah's eyes just long enough to smirk before disappearing into the crowd. "Sir, are you okay?" she said, kneeling beside Harold. He was sitting up now, jaw tight, brushing invisible dust from his slacks. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding," she said, pointing to the scrape on his hand and the spot just above his eyebrow. He waved it off. "Skin breaks easy these days. It's nothing." "I'm calling an ambulance." "No." His voice held the command of a man who had spent decades giving orders. "No hospitals, no fuss." Sarah hesitated, then leaned back and pressed the emergency button on her radio anyway. "Then we at least get this on record." Harold stood, slower this time, retrieving his cap from the ground. His hands trembled slightly, not from pain, but something deeper, something raw and old. "You sure you don't want to sit down?" Sarah asked. "I'll be all right." He pulled his coat tighter around himself, the collar hiding the bruises already forming on his neck. Sarah didn't press, but she did follow as he walked. His gait was limping now, stiff with pride. An injury. He passed by a bench where a teenager sat glued to his phone, reviewing the video he'd just uploaded. Harold glanced briefly. The boy didn't look up. Outside the mall's sliding doors, rain had started to fall, soft and steady. "Let me drive you home," Sarah offered. Harold paused. "I appreciate that, ma'am, but I walk this part." She nodded. "I'll file the report. I saw most of it, and we've got footage." He stopped then, looked her in the eyes. "Thank you for stepping in." She gave a slight nod, uncertain whether to salute or shake his hand. He spared her the decision and raised his fingers to his temple briefly in an old-school Marine's gesture. Then he turned and walked into the rain, every step an act of will. Back inside, Sarah pulled her phone from her pocket and opened the security feed app. The footage was already archived. She tapped export, then paused. Her gaze drifted to the name listed under Harold's emergency contact form. Marcus Williams. She clicked share and sent the footage with a brief note. "This is Sarah Martinez from Westfield Security. Your friend Harold was attacked today. He didn't want help, but I think he needs it. Video attached. Please call me." Less than 2 minutes later, halfway across town, a phone rang inside a modest suburban home, lined with old war medals and framed black and white photographs. Marcus "Tank" Williams answered without looking at the screen. His voice was gravel laced with iron. "This is Williams." He listened, watched, and when the video ended, he didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he picked up the landline. Time to make the call. The call from Sarah Martinez hit Tank Williams like a flashbang. No noise at first, just a high-pitched hum and a kind of stillness, as if the world itself paused to gauge his reaction. The video she'd sent still glowed on his tablet, paused. At the frame, where Harold, his gunny, his brother, lay curled on the cold mall tiles, while kids with sagging pants and hollow bravado laughed overhead. Tank hadn't seen Harold on the ground since Chosin. He stood slowly, every joint in his 82-year-old frame crackling, not with weakness, but with reawakened purpose. The living room of his small Georgia home, lined with medals, photos, the folded flag from his wife's funeral, seemed to narrow around him. This wasn't just a bad incident. This was an offense against something sacred. Within 5 minutes, the war room was open. He grabbed the old leather-bound address book from his gun safe. Some of the numbers inside were crossed out, not because friendships had faded, but because time had claimed its due. But the names that remained weren't just entries. They were fire-forged bonds, carved into the marrow of men who'd once fought side by side when the snow turned red. He started with Father Miguel. "Tank?" The voice on the other end was warm, gentle. I'm activating the net, Padre. Silence. Then, what happened? It's Harold. He was jumped. Some punks at a shopping mall. We got footage. They knocked him down like he was nothing. Is he alive? Yes, but I saw his face. It's not the wounds. They got to his pride, to the part of him that never came home from Korea. You know what that means. Father Miguel's sigh was soft but steady. Where do we rendezvous? My place, 1700. I'll be there. Next was Tommy Chen. The line connected in the middle of a high-rise boardroom somewhere in San Francisco. Background noise buzzed with the staccato pace of suits and stock markets. Tank, I'm in a meeting. Drop it. It's Harold. Silence again. Then, give me 2 hours. I'll catch the red eye. Send me the footage. It's in your inbox. We're gathering at my place. Good. I'll bring the kit. Finally, he called Jacob Razor Morrison, the hardest of them all. Razor had been Harold's squad leader, gruff, brilliant, haunted. He now lived alone in a rural part of Pennsylvania, spending his days in quiet therapy sessions at the VA. I know, Razor said before Tank even finished. I already saw it. You did? Tommy forwarded it. I've been watching it on loop for an hour. You coming? Tank! I never stop being ready. Tank smiled grimly. 1700. I'll be early. With those 3 calls made, the gears turned. After decades of peacetime, of retirement homes and doctor visits and grandchildren's birthdays, the old net was live. What began as a dusty list of emergency contacts turned back into a tactical command chain. By 1400 hours, Elena Sullivan stood on the front steps of her father's apartment complex, ringing his doorbell like her finger had something to prove. She hadn't seen him in 3 weeks, not since their last disagreement about assisted living. But when the mall called her this morning and said he'd declined ambulance transport after a physical incident, the blood drained from her limbs. Now she waited, fists clenched, dread curled in her belly like a bad meal. The door creaked open, and there stood Harold, upright but slower than usual. A butterfly bandage decorated his temple. His pride was like a paper suit in a thunderstorm, trying to hold shape, but already soaked through. Eleanor, he said. She stepped forward, arms already reaching, but stopped when he flinched ever so slightly. I'm fine, he added, just a scuffle, nothing to fuss over. You were attacked, Dad. There's video, it's all over the internet. I know, he said, eyes narrowing. That's why I'm not watching it. She moved past him into the apartment, noting the old war photos on the walls, always in perfect alignment, always dust-free. The pride of a Marine, right down to the coasters on the coffee table. She turned. You need to go to the hospital, and already checked. Sarah from mall security made sure I was looked at. Bruised ribs, cracked pride. I'll survive. Dad, I said I'm fine. The tone was steel. She recognized it from childhood, the same voice he'd used when grounding her for sneaking out, or when Mom died and she wanted to skip the funeral. This time, it didn't feel parental. It felt final. Tank called, Harold said softly. Elena blinked. Tank Williams, your old unit buddy? He's coming, they all are. To do what exactly? Harold didn't answer immediately. He moved to the window and pulled the curtain aside, as if expecting a convoy. To make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else, and to remind this town what real men look like. Back at Tank's home, preparations took shape with the precision of a tactical op. Tank had cleared his garage and turned it into a makeshift HQ. A folding table held laptops, printouts, maps of the mall and surrounding neighborhoods. Tommy Chen's jet had landed an hour earlier, and the tech tycoon now stood in a pressed polo and jeans, sleeves rolled, glasses perched at the bridge of his nose as he pulled up local school rosters and police records using private databases. Danny Rodriguez, he said. 17, no father listed. Mom works 3 jobs, known associate of a local crew. Low level, mostly petty theft. 2 suspensions last year. Skipped detention yesterday. Tank grunted. So no real gang. Just a wannabe with no man to set him straight. Father Miguel arrived next, still in his clerical collar, jacket dusted from travel. He removed his coat and rolled up his sleeves like a surgeon, preparing for something more delicate than blood. "We're not here to punish," he reminded. "We're here to restore." "We'll see," Razor said from the far wall, arms folded. His eyes hadn't left the footage since he arrived. His voice sounded like it had been aged in gravel. Tank pointed to the whiteboard. "We visit Harold, tonight. Let him tell it in his own words. Then we make a plan. We hit back with dignity, not fists." Tommy looked up. "We'll need intel on when Danny's usually at the mall. And we'll need Sarah's cooperation if we want to do this without causing chaos." "I already contacted her," Tank said. "She's in. She served in Afghanistan, lost her husband out there. She gets it." They all nodded. A shared understanding passed through the room, not just of military protocol, but of something deeper, the sense that honor had been bruised, and they were the last line of defense. By 1700 hours, the core team had assembled in Tank's living room, 5 aging warriors surrounded by decades of ghosts and a single purpose. Tank poured coffee. No one touched it. Razor finally broke the silence. "You know this isn't just about Harold." They looked up. "This is about all of us," he said. "Every damn time someone looks past us like we're furniture. Every kid who sees the medals and thinks it's just costume jewelry. Every moment we've swallowed our pride because we didn't want to cause a scene. Well, now we have a scene." Father Miguel nodded. "But we lead with the lessons we learned the hard way, not the ones the world's forgotten." Tommy added, "I'll bankroll whatever we need. Bail, banners, body cams. Just don't ask me to run. I'm 2 hips away from bionic." The laughter broke the tension briefly. Even Razor smirked. Tank stood, hands behind his back like the leader he'd always been. "Tomorrow, we go see Harold. Hear his story. Then we confront this kid, not to hurt him, not to scare him, but to teach him. You all in?" They didn't answer with words. Just one by one, 4 fists met in the center of the table, their knuckles as weathered as history. Outside, the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across Tank's driveway, 5 silhouettes standing tall despite the passage of time. The old unit was back, and the mission had begun. Tank's living room smelled faintly of old leather and cedar polish, the scent of a life steeped in discipline and remembrance. The walls were dressed in shadow boxes, rows of medals and photographs, dating back to Korea, framed citations and dog tags mounted with reverence. But today, the room was not a museum. It was a command post. By 0900 hours, all 4 surviving members of Harold's old unit stood shoulder to shoulder again. There was no fanfare, no ceremony, just a quiet, shared gravity that needed no explanation. Harold was the last to arrive. He stepped through the front door wearing the same faded service cap that had drawn Danny's mockery days earlier. His gait was slower, the bruising along his left cheek still fresh, but his posture hadn't changed. Still upright, still squared. "Permission to enter?" he asked, voice dry with humor. "Always," Tank said and opened his arms. They embraced the way only warriors do, briefly, firmly, then with a sharp clap on the back that said more than words could. "Damn good to see you, Gunny," Jacob Razor Morrison murmured, nodding once. His tall frame hovered near the fireplace, hands tucked behind him like he was back at parade rest. Father Miguel stepped forward next. "You look like you've walked through worse," Harold grunted. "That's the thing, I have. But this one cut deeper somehow." Tommy Chen came last, offering a hand instead of a hug. "You okay with this, Harold? Us jumping in?" Harold glanced at the others. "You think I could stop you?" Tommy smiled. "Just checking." Tank motioned to the large oak dining table now covered in documents, laptops, and a printed layout of Westfield Mall. "Sit down. Time for the War Council." Harold lowered himself slowly into the high-backed chair at the head of the table. Tank began. So, here's what we know. Danny Rodriguez, 17. No record, but Sarah Martinez says he's part of a loose group of mall kids that hang around to show off and stir trouble. Surrogate gang, Razor said. No structure, just scattered kids playing tough. Nah, Tommy pulled his school files, Tank continued. 3 suspensions, fighting. 1 teacher flagged him for threatening another student, but nothing stuck. No father at home. Mother's working herself to death trying to hold things together. Father Miguel folded his hands. Then the question becomes, is this a child acting out of malice, or a boy flailing because no one's ever shown him what manhood means? Tank shot him a look. You know what he did to Harold. I do. But I also know what we were. At 17, I'd have ended up a bitter drunk if not for the core. Maybe he needs structure, not sentencing. Tommy leaned in, tapping the screen of his laptop. He's got a part-time job at the movie theater, 2 days a week. His shift ends tomorrow at 5 p.m. That's our window. Harold raised a hand. Before we go planning, ambushes, let's get one thing straight. All heads turned. I'm not looking to ruin the kid's life, Harold said, but I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen either. He saw a man he thought was weak and went in for the kill. That's what bothers me most. He saw this cap. He touched the brim gently and thought it meant nothing. Father Miguel nodded. Then maybe our job is to show him what it does mean. Razor exhaled hard through his nose. Talking only gets so far. These punks speak a different language. Respect means fear to them. Which is why we don't come alone, Tank said. We show up together, in uniform. We confront him where it happened. No threats, no violence, just presence. Let the world see who we are. Tommy added, we make it public, the way they made Harold's humiliation public. Record it, control the narrative. Sarah's in, Tank confirmed. She can manage crowd control without drawing too much attention, and she'll make sure the mall's okay with us being there. Harold took a breath. If this goes sideways, it makes me look like an old man trying to pick a fight he can't win. No, Razor said. It shows the world that even old lions still have teeth. There was a pause, filled with unspoken memories. Foxholes, bitter winters, field radios crackling under artillery. The stakes were different now, but the mission still had the same code. Protect your own. Tank finally turned to the whiteboard, where a bullet-pointed list had begun to form. Operation Vindicator uniforms, full dress arrival, 16:45 hours, Westfield Mall public location, food court stage area, message delivery. Each man speaks Harold. Optional confrontation. Exit strategy, controlled, peaceful. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You named it? Tommy asked, amused. Tank shrugged. Old habits. I love it, Harold said. I haven't felt part of a mission in a long time. Razor stood and moved to the board. I'll coordinate visual presence. We arrive together, walk in formation. Minimal words. Let the optics speak. Tommy added, I'll get my assistant to run the camera discreetly. We'll stream it, but cut it later for press. This won't be some viral sideshow. It'll be legacy. Father Miguel placed a hand over Harold's. You don't have to speak if you don't want to. No, Harold said. I do. Just not with anger. I want him to understand what he tried to break. The conversation shifted to details. Timing, logistics, mall exits, contingency scenarios if Danny ran or resisted. Tank handed out walkie-talkies from a locked drawer, still functional after all these years. Elena arrived at noon. She hesitated in the doorway, stunned by the sight of 4 elderly men in pressed uniforms and purpose. Her father, surrounded by what looked like ghosts in dress blues. She stepped inside, voice tight. What? Exactly are you all doing? Harold looked at her and smiled softly. Mission planning. I thought we agreed you'd let the police handle this? I am letting them, he said, but that doesn't mean I can't do something too. She glanced at Tank, then at Father Miguel. This doesn't feel safe. You're not young men anymore. Exactly, Miguel said, which means we have to be smarter, not faster. Tommy stood. Elena, we're not here to hurt anyone. We're trying to show this kid what real men look like. Your father's earned that much. She turned back to Harold. You could get arrested, or worse. He rose, slowly but deliberately. And if I do nothing, I sit with that bruise on my soul every morning until I die. And I let every kid watching that video think it's okay to humiliate a man who served his country. Elena's eyes welled. Then at least let me come. No, Harold said gently. You protect me every day. This is one I have to protect myself. She looked at the room full of veterans, men who had stood shoulder to shoulder in frozen battlefields, now gray-haired and aching, but no less fierce. She nodded finally. Then I'll be at the mall, in the background, just in case. Tank saluted her, half teasing. Semper Fi, ma'am. The room relaxed as she exited, and the men returned to their planning. Outside, the sky began to cloud, as if the air itself understood something was coming. Not war, not violence, a reckoning, a reminder, and above all else, honor, walking once more on steady legs into a world that had forgotten what it looked like. The knock came just past 1700 hours. Harold had been sitting quietly in his recliner, the same one his wife Carol had gifted him. On their 40th wedding anniversary, she'd passed 5 years ago, but the indent of her body still lingered in the opposite cushion of the love seat, her absence a constant shape in the room. He hadn't moved much since Elena left earlier. That afternoon, he'd simply sat, uniform laid out across his lap, cap resting gently atop it, waiting. Another knock, firm this time. He stood slowly, every motion deliberate. The bruises on his ribs made breathing shallow, but the pain helped him stay grounded. Reminded him this wasn't some old war story. This was now. He opened the door. There they were. Tank in full dress blues, polished shoes, medals gleaming, Razor tall and silent, like a statue forged in war. Tommy Chen with his uniform slightly tailored at the waist, but still impeccable, face solemn beneath his glasses, and Father Miguel holding a small wooden rosary in one hand and Harold's favorite bakery box in the other. No words, just a brief salute shared among old brothers. Then Tank stepped forward, the first to speak. You still make us wait like it's morning inspection. Harold let out a thin chuckle. Keeps you honest. They came inside, one by one, boots clicking against tile, heads turning as they took in the living room. Photographs lined the mantel, Marines in foxholes, men grinning with cigarettes and rifles, Carol holding a baby in a yellow sundress. Everything meticulously, arranged, frozen in time. Tommy glanced at the silver frame on the end table. That's Okinawa, right? Right after we shipped back, Carol took that one, said I still looked scared. She wasn't wrong, Tank added. They all laughed, low, deep, the sound of men who had survived both war and each other. But the mood shifted as they sat. Razor was the first to speak plainly. Tell us what happened. We saw the video, but not what you saw. Harold swallowed. He reached for his cap, turned it slowly in his hands. They spotted me from across the food court. Just kids. Didn't think much at first. Then one of them, Danny, started mouthing off. About the hat. About me being old. Thought I'd ignore it. But when I asked them to watch their language, something in him changed. He paused. It was like he needed me to be weak, so he could feel strong. The room was still. He knocked me down, kicked me once in the ribs. The rest didn't last long. They scattered when that security lady showed up. "Sarah," said Father Miguel. "She's been in contact. Said you refused help." "I did," Harold nodded. "I didn't want to be anyone's pity story." "You're not," Tank said firmly. "You're our story, and we don't let our story end like that." Harold's eyes met his. "That's what I'm struggling with, Tank. It's not the bruises, it's what I felt lying there, helpless. Not because I couldn't fight back, but because fighting didn't make sense anymore, not in that moment." Razor leaned forward. "So, what does make sense?" Harold exhaled. "Standing, speaking, making sure they know who we are. That. This uniform isn't decoration. Then we go forward," Father Miguel said, "as one." Just then, the door opened again. Elena, stepping in with a container of soup and an overnight bag. She froze when she saw the full room of decorated veterans sitting like a tribunal in her father's living room. "I brought food," she said, awkwardly. Tank stood and took it from her hands with a smile. "Always said the Corps runs on chow." Harold gave her a grateful nod. "You didn't have to come back tonight." "I know," she replied, her eyes drifting over the group. "But I figured if I can't stop you, I might as well support you." Father Miguel rose. "We were just about to review the plan." Elena settled into the armrest of the couch, arms crossed but no longer confrontational. She watched them the way a daughter watches a room full of men who'd held her father's life in their hands. Tank laid it out again. Uniforms, formation, public confrontation with Danny. A peaceful mission, recorded and documented to reclaim not only Harold's dignity, but the very concept of respect across generations. "He might run," Elena warned. "Teenagers don't handle confrontation well." "Then it becomes a lesson in accountability," Razor said, "whether he wants it or not." They discussed logistics, where Harold would stand, who would speak first, when to let the silence speak louder than words. Sarah Martinez had agreed to signal them when Danny's shift at the theater ended. Tommy's assistant would be recording discreetly from the balcony. "I still think this kid doesn't fully understand what he did," Harold murmured. "He will," Tank promised. "By the time we're done, he'll understand everything." The room fell quiet again, not tense, resolved. Elena looked around, her voice quieter now. "Why does it take this? Why does it take a public humiliation for people to remember who you all are?" Tommy responded without bitterness. "Because people only remember what's convenient. History gets shelved. Veterans get forgotten until we're useful again." "But we didn't come for revenge," Miguel added. "We came to remind. That's different." Harold stood then, slow but deliberate, like rising for colors. "Let's do this right," he said. "Let's make it mean something." He picked up his uniform jacket from the recliner. The fabric was heavier than it used to be, but it still fit, still bore the weight of service. He slipped it on, each button a silent oath. Elena helped him straighten the collar. "You sure? You want this?" she asked. He gave her a smile, faint but steady. "I need this." Outside, the evening air had cooled, the wind rolling gently across the street. As the sun set, Harold stepped onto his porch in full-dress blues, flanked by 4 men who had once stood beside him in a country half a world away. Time had etched lines into their faces, slowed their strides, but it hadn't touched their purpose. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. A few came outside, silently watching the procession. No sirens, no flags, just 5 old warriors walking into the twilight. Tomorrow, the world would remember who they were. Detective Ray Cooper pulled into the parking lot of Westfield Mall just as the sky turned the soft gray of early morning. The place always looked sterile this early, an empty commercial shell waiting to inhale the chaos of the day. But today, Ray wasn't here for loiterers or petty theft. He was here because of a video, one that made his gut clench for reasons even he hadn't fully sorted yet. Inside his cruiser, he tapped the tablet mounted to his dash. The footage played again. Harold Sullivan, Marine veteran, knocked to the tile by a gang of teens who barely looked old enough to drive. Ray watched as Harold crumpled to the floor, watched the smirk on the boy's face, watched the bystanders recording, not reacting. He paused it, leaned back. His father, Sergeant Lloyd Cooper, Vietnam, Purple Heart, posthumous, would have thrown the tablet out the window if he'd seen that. Ray stepped out of the cruiser. Inside, mall security supervisor Sarah Martinez met him just beyond the food. Court, hair tied back, clipboard in hand. "Detective Cooper," she said, extending a hand. "Thanks for coming in early." "No problem, Ms. Martinez. This place quieter than usual? Kids don't roll in till after lunch. We've got about 4 hours." "Good." He glanced around. "Walk me through it." She led him to the bench where Harold had been sitting before the assault. "He comes every Wednesday, has for years. Coffee, newspaper, always in his cap. Anyone ever bother him before?" "Not like this. He's had teens poke fun. Harmless stuff, but that group, Danny Rodriguez and the others, they pushed it." "You know them?" Sarah nodded. "Danny's been warned before, mostly mouthing off. He's not affiliated with any real gang, but he's hungry for attention and respect." Ray made a note. "You said you filmed the end?" "I did, but Mallcam's got the whole thing." She led him back to her small office. There he reviewed 3 angles of the same scene, from above, from the hallway, from the coffee kiosk. It wasn't just a scuffle, it was a deliberate group escalation. Words, then shoving, then Danny initiating the physical assault. Ray closed the file. "I'll need full names and contact info for each teen involved." "I've got it prepped." He hesitated before the next question. "And what about Sullivan? Is he pressing charges?" Sarah's face shifted. "He's conflicted, but his friends aren't." "Friends?" She gave him a look. "You haven't heard?" Ray raised an eyebrow. "They called themselves the Last Detail, Harold's old Marine unit. They've kept in touch for 70 years. One of them's a retired police chief, one's a priest, one runs a construction empire. The fourth's basically an intelligence analyst. And they've inserted themselves into this. They're planning something peaceful, I think, but it's organized. They're not just angry, they're mobilizing." Ray exhaled. "So they're going vigilante. Not in the way you're thinking. But yes, justice is coming from 2 directions, yours and theirs." He rubbed the back of his neck. "That's exactly the kind of thing that makes my job 10 times harder." Sarah crossed her arms. "And yet, maybe it's exactly what this town needs." Ray didn't reply. He returned to his car and punched in the address for the Rodriguez residence. A small apartment complex near the edge of town. Kids out. In front on bikes, a woman dragging 2 garbage bags to the dumpster with a phone clamped to her shoulder. He recognized her from the system profile, Maria Rodriguez, Danny's mother. He approached slowly, showing his badge. "Mrs. Rodriguez?" She ended the call. "If this is about Danny..." "It is. I'm Detective Ray Cooper. Can we talk?" She nodded, eyes already tired. Inside the apartment, the air was thick with overcooked rice and detergent, clothes stacked on chairs, textbooks on the floor, a framed photo of a young Danny on the wall, First Communion, bright-eyed, clean-cut, hopeful. "What happened?" she asked before he sat. Ray didn't sugarcoat. "He assaulted a veteran, caught on tape. There are witnesses." Her face sagged. "What did he do now?" Ray watched her closely. "You didn't know?" "No, I'm working 12-hour shifts at the hospital. I barely sleep. He's 17 and angry and always chasing something. I tried. Lord knows I tried. He ever talk about his father?" She flinched. "Walked out when Danny was 8. No word since." Ray softened his tone. "He needs a man in his life. Not someone to scare him, but someone to show him." She nodded slowly. "So what happens now?" "I'll be arresting him. But there's an alternative path forming. Harold's fellow Marines want to confront him, not violently. They want to teach him what real respect means, in public, with witnesses." Maria's eyes filled. "Will that help?" "I don't know," Ray said honestly, "but I believe in what they're trying to do, and if Danny sees men like Harold standing tall after what happened, maybe it'll stick." Just then, the door opened and Danny stepped in, backpack slung low. Hoodie up, he froze when he saw Ray. Maria whispered, "Danny, we need to talk." Ray stood. "Son, I'm Detective Cooper. I need you to come with me." Danny's eyes narrowed, but his hands didn't reach for anything. "Why?" Ray held up the tablet. The video played. The moment Danny shoved Harold, the moment Harold fell. Danny watched, face hardening, jaw locking. But then something flickered behind his eyes. Shame, maybe. Maria placed a hand on his shoulder. "What were you thinking?" "I wasn't," he muttered. "It was just a joke. The guys—" "No one's laughing," Ray said. "You're being charged with assault. But there's a choice here. You face a courtroom or you face 5 men who lived through hell just to come home." Danny looked up. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Ray said, "they want to talk, and they'll be waiting for you at the mall." Danny scoffed. "What, like they're gonna lecture me? Maybe, or maybe they'll change your life." Back at Tank's house, the war room buzzed with final coordination. Tommy tapped. Through social media feeds, footage has now hit 300,000 views. It's on 3 local news pages. It's gonna be crowded tomorrow. Tank smiled. "Even better." Razor looked out the window. "You think Cooper will back off?" "He won't stop us," Miguel said. "Not if we keep it peaceful. He's got more in common with us than he admits." Harold sat at the head of the table, hands clasped over a small, worn Bible Miguel had handed him earlier. "I never wanted this attention," he murmured. "We know," Tank said, "but maybe it's not about you anymore." Harold looked up. "Maybe it's about what you represent, and reminding everyone, especially him, that real strength doesn't come from hurting the weak." The veterans fell silent. Outside, the sun set again, casting long shadows across Tank's backyard, just like the ones they'd marched through. 7 decades ago, they weren't heading into battle this time, but they were still answering the call. The Westfield Mall hadn't seen a crowd this size on a weekday in years. By 4:30 p.m., shoppers milled around the food court, drawn not by sales or flashy signs, but by a quiet, almost reverent tension humming in the air. It was as if people knew, without being told, that something unusual was about to happen. Near the center of it all, Sarah Martinez stood discreetly by the security podium, dressed in plain clothes, but with her badge clipped to her belt. She glanced at the escalator every few seconds, radioing updates to her small team scattered throughout the mall. "Group arriving," she finally said, pressing her earpiece. 4 o'clock sharp. They're here." From the second-floor promenade, Tommy's assistant had already positioned 2 discreet cameras with wide angles on the food court stage, a small raised platform used for holiday events. Now it would serve a different purpose entirely. The double glass doors at the mall's east entrance slid open, and in they walked. 5 old men in full Marine Corps dress blues, medals aligned in perfect rows across their chests, hats pristine, shoes shining like obsidian. They walked shoulder to shoulder, Harold at the center, his bruises fading but not gone. Tank to his right, Razor to his left, Tommy and Father Miguel flanking them in silent symmetry. Conversation around them ceased, shoppers turned, employees paused mid-task. Parents hushed their children. Cameras lifted. They didn't need to speak a word. Their presence was thunder in velvet. As they approached the stage, Danny Rodriguez stood near the pretzel stand, jaw slack. He wore his theater uniform, a cheap polo with a logo on the breast, khakis slightly wrinkled. His earbuds dangled around his neck, forgotten. He hadn't believed it would happen. Not really. He'd thought his mom was bluffing, that the cops were trying to scare him. But now, watching 5 old men in military dress cross the food court like a slow-moving battalion, something inside him cracked. "Danny," Sarah said, stepping beside him, gentle but firm. "It's time." He didn't move at first. Then, like his feet had minds of their own, he followed her toward the center. The veterans stepped up onto the platform. Sarah gave a small nod to Tommy's assistant above. The camera lights blinked on. Tank took one step forward. "We didn't come here for revenge," he said, voice clear, projected without microphone. "We didn't come to embarrass you. We came to teach you something you clearly haven't been taught." Danny stood at the base of the stage, hands in his pockets, posture defensive. "This is Gunnery Sergeant Harold Sullivan," Tank continued, gesturing to Harold, who stood straight despite his age. "He served 3 tours. He was wounded saving men who didn't come home, and last week you kicked him like trash on the sidewalk." Gasps murmured through the crowd. Cameras recorded. "You thought you were being funny," Tank said, "that an old man couldn't fight back. But that cap you mocked? It's not decoration. It's not cosplay. It's a symbol of sacrifice, of brotherhood, of men who laid everything down for the right to stand here free." Razor stepped forward next. His voice was gravel and ice. "We buried more friends than you'll ever have. We've bled in snow, in mud, in sand, and we survived. But what you did, boy, that wasn't just an attack on Harold. It was an attack on every one of us." Danny's face flushed. He looked down. Tommy stepped forward, more composed. "We don't want to destroy you, Danny. We want to wake you. You think respect is fear. That power is about who you can knock down. That's because no one ever showed you what real power looks like." He turned to Harold. "Show him." Harold stepped forward. His face was worn, but his eyes were clear, unshaking. "Son," he said, "I fought people who didn't speak my language, who wanted to end my life just because I wore a uniform. I've seen real hate. You don't hate me. You envy something you don't understand, and that makes you dangerous." Danny looked up. "I'm not asking you to apologize," Harold continued. "I'm asking you to recognize what you did, what you could have done to someone weaker. It echoes through families, through generations. If you don't stop now, it gets worse." Harold's voice cracked, but he didn't stop. "I buried my wife 5 years ago. I live alone. You don't know what it feels like to hit the ground and wonder if that's it, if this is how you die, on tile, in front of phones, in silence." Danny's lips parted. "I didn't mean," he started. Harold raised a hand. "Don't tell me what you didn't mean. Show me what you do mean, right now, in front of all these people." The silence was suffocating. Danny stepped forward, slowly, unevenly. He climbed the 2 stairs onto the platform, feet dragging until he stood before Harold. Then, in front of 100 watching eyes, he dropped to one knee. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I don't know why I did it. I was just trying to feel like somebody." Harold didn't touch him. He didn't move. He simply nodded. "Then start by becoming a better one." Father Miguel stepped forward now, lifting his voice. "This isn't the end of something. It's the beginning. The start of a conversation. One we've all been avoiding. Between age and youth. Between history and future." He turned to the crowd. "We don't rise by tearing others down. We rise by lifting one another up." Applause started slowly. One older man in a veteran's cap, then a woman holding a stroller, then another, then half the food court. The noise swelled, not like a sports victory, but like a collective sigh, a recognition of something long overdue. As Danny stepped back down, Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. He didn't flinch. Harold remained on the stage a moment longer. Then slowly he removed his cap and held it over his chest. "For the ones who didn't make it home," he said quietly. The other 4 veterans joined him. 5 men, hands. over hearts, standing in the center of a shopping mall. A moment later, Ray Cooper arrived with 2 officers in tow. He paused at the edge of the crowd, taking it all in. The crowd, the boy, the quiet dignity. Sarah walked over and handed him the footage. "No need for cuffs," she said softly. "Something more important just happened." Ray nodded slowly. "I'll file the paperwork, but I won't interrupt this." As the veterans descended from the stage, Tommy whispered to his assistant, "Get me a clean cut of this. We're sending it to every newsroom in the state." Harold walked beside Tank, head high. "That went better than I thought." Tank chuckled. "They say Marines never retire. Guess we just take on new missions." Behind them, Danny stood with Father Miguel, not running, not posturing, just listening. And somewhere deep inside, something old and sacred stirred, not just in him, but in every witness who had watched 5 old men rewrite what justice could look like. Not retribution, not vengeance, but dignity, delivered in full uniform. To the quiet after the confrontation felt heavier than the moment itself. Westfield Mall slowly resumed its rhythm. Food court lines reformed, children resumed their chatter, and stores buzzed back to life. But something had changed. People moved slower, kinder, a little more aware. Harold and his unit had left more than just a message. They had etched a moment into the collective memory of the town. Detective Ray Cooper sat behind his desk at the station, the soft whir of the ceiling fan overhead competing with the chatter of keyboards and phones around him. The confrontation video had gone viral within 24 hours. News outlets, veteran groups, and parenting blogs were dissecting it from every angle. And now came the legal aftermath. He reviewed the report again, clean, professional, factual. On the afternoon of May 12th, a peaceful public confrontation was initiated by 5 Korean War veterans in full military dress at Westfield Mall, in response to an unprovoked assault on Harold Sullivan, 85, by Danny Rodriguez, 17, and 3 unidentified minors. The confrontation resulted in a public apology by the primary aggressor. No physical threats were issued. All mall security protocols were followed. Still, charges had to be filed. Danny Rodriguez and 2 others, both identified via footage, were being charged with misdemeanor assault and public disturbance. The DA had agreed to consider restorative justice options based on Danny's cooperation and the veteran's preference for rehabilitation over incarceration. Ray rubbed his temples. On paper, it was straightforward. In his gut, it was anything but. The door opened. Father Miguel stepped in, not wearing his collar this time, but a simple button-up and slacks. He held a sealed envelope. "Morning, Detective." Ray gestured to the seat across from him. "Padre, I have something," Miguel said. "Danny wrote this, asked me to bring it to you. Said he wasn't ready to talk again yet, but he wanted you to know where his head is." Ray opened the envelope and read, "To Detective Cooper, I don't know what to say that doesn't sound fake, but I'm writing anyway. When I knocked Mr. Sullivan down, I thought I was proving something, that I wasn't weak, that I could be in control. I didn't see a person, I saw a target, and that scares me now. I saw the look in his eyes when he got up. He didn't yell or try to hit me back. He just looked at me like I disappointed him. I've never had a man look at me like that before. My dad's been gone since I was 8. My mum works herself to the bone. I've never really had someone sit me down and tell me what it means to be a man. I guess I picked it up from movies, from guys on Instagram, from anger, but then those 5 men walked into the mall, and suddenly I saw it. Real men. They didn't have to shout. They didn't have to fight. They just stood there, and everyone knew they were worth listening to. Mr. Sullivan told me I could still be better. That stuck. I know I still need to face the consequences. I'll take whatever comes. But if there's a way to do something useful with this, to change, to learn, I want that chance. I've never written a letter like this before. Thank you, Ian, for reading it. Danny Rodriguez. Ray folded the letter carefully. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He means it, Miguel said softly. He's been coming to see me twice a week, quiet at first. Now he's asking questions about service, sacrifice, and faith. Ray nodded slowly. I've dealt with kids like him before. Usually they talk a good game, disappear after a week. This one might be different. He will be, Miguel said, because now he's got 5 shadows behind him, reminding him what better looks like. Ray tapped his fingers against the desk. I'm still charging him. That won't change. Miguel smiled. We expected that. But I'm going to recommend he be placed into a supervised community mentorship program. I want Harold and the unit involved. Real structure. Measurable goals. Miguel leaned forward. I can organize that. And I want Danny on the record, publicly. I want this town to see the full arc. I'll ask him. Ray stood. We'll keep this clean, transparent, but if he slips once, I'll know, Miguel said. And I'll hold him accountable. They shook hands. As Miguel left, Elena Sullivan entered. She looked exhausted, her nurse scrubs wrinkled and darkened at the knees. Detective. Elena, sit down. She sank into the chair across from him. I came because I don't know what happens next. My father's suddenly everywhere, every news channel, every Facebook post. I can't walk into the grocery store without hearing his name. Ray offered a wry smile. Your father sparked something. People are responding. She let out a breath. I should be proud, I am, but part of me is scared. Scared of what? Of what this attention might do. He's still fragile, even if he won't admit it. I don't want him getting hurt trying to save everyone else. Ray nodded slowly. He's not trying to save everyone. Just one kid, and maybe himself. Eleanor looked at him sharply. I interviewed him again, Ray continued. He didn't want to press charges, but he did want Danny to feel the weight of it. He wanted Danny to have to look at what he did, and then face people who had bled for this country. She looked down. He never talked like this before, not even to me. Sometimes, Ray said, we don't realize we've been holding on to something until someone shakes us hard. Enough to let go. She nodded. He's different now, not just louder, alive. That's not a bad thing. She smiled faintly. No, it's not. Back at Harold's apartment, the phone hadn't stopped ringing for 3 days. Veterans groups called from across the country. A high school civics teacher requested Harold to speak. Local news wanted a follow-up interview. Even a state senator's aide had reached out, hoping to schedule a town hall appearance. But Harold wasn't doing it for fame. He picked up the calls he wanted, ignored the ones that felt hollow. Today, he answered only one. Hello. It's Danny. A beat of silence. Harold sat down. I'm not calling to apologize again, Danny said. I'm calling because Father Miguel said you might be willing to meet me. One-on-one. Harold was quiet. I'm not scared, Danny said quickly. I just want to know more about you, about the war, about why you all still talk to each other like that. Harold smiled to himself. All right, you pick the time. Tomorrow after school? Deal. And Mr. Sullivan? Yes? I'm not going to screw this up. Harold's voice was gentle. Then let's make sure of it. Together. A week later, a small gathering formed in the community center library. Harold sat in the front row beside Tank, Razor, Tommy, and Father Miguel. Danny stood at the podium, hands shaking slightly, but his voice clear. I thought being strong meant not caring, meant taking what you wanted, meant putting people down before they could do it to you. But then I met 5 men who were everything I pretended to be, and they did something no one else ever did. They gave me another chance. He looked at Harold. Thank you. The room erupted in applause. Eleanor wiped a tear as she clapped. Ray stood at the back with arms crossed, pride flickering in his usually stoic face. That night, Harold sat by his window with a steaming cup of tea and the soft hum of jazz playing in the background. The stars outside were faint but steady. A knock came at the door. He opened it to find Danny holding a book, Flags of Our Fathers. "I figured I should start learning properly," the boy said. Harold chuckled and stepped aside. "Come on in, son. Let's talk about what happens after the battle's over." By the time summer arrived, the confrontation at Westfield Mall had transformed from a shocking local incident into a catalyst for something far larger. It started with whispers, conversations over church coffee tables, in barbershops, at PTA meetings. A local podcast covered it. Then a syndicated radio show picked it up. Within weeks, the town's weekly newspaper featured a full-spread piece titled "The Day the Old Guard Took a Stand," and under it a photograph of Harold Sullivan in full uniform, eyes steady beneath his cap, surrounded by his 4 brothers in arms. But the story didn't end with virality. It turned into movement. The idea came from Father Miguel during a follow-up meeting at the town community center, now called by locals the briefing room, in a nod to the old veterans who'd taken over its planning boards. "We can't change every kid," he told the small group of city officials, teachers, and parents, "but we can reach some. We don't need miracles. We need proximity. Let them see what dignity looks like, not from a screen, but from a seat across the table." Tommy Chen stepped up without hesitation, offering funding for a 12-week pilot program. He hired a coordinator, partnered with the local high school, and created what he called the next detail. Each week, at-risk teens would meet with a veteran mentor. They'd talk, learn, build, fix, share meals, watch documentaries, tour museums. But most of all, they'd listen. Harold was the first to sign on. So was Razor. Tank, of course, volunteered before the ink dried. Even Eleanor helped organize logistics, overseeing transport and medical waivers. And every Thursday afternoon she'd bring sandwiches. Enough. For 20 boys, 5 mentors, and whoever else wandered in with curiosity and an open mind. Danny showed up early to every session. He never tried to be the loudest in the room again. He sat beside Harold almost every time, asking about battles, medals, missed birthdays. He wanted to know what it meant to endure, and the answers weren't always easy. "I held my best friend while he died in snow," Harold said one day, voice soft, steady. He'd just turned 19, hadn't kissed a girl, never saw spring. "Again, you think anger makes you strong? I'll tell you, nothing feels weaker than surviving when your brother didn't. But you keep going. You choose to be better, every day." No one spoke for a long time afterward, but the next week every boy returned. The mall where it all began didn't stay the same either. Sarah Martinez partnered with the veterans to create a small permanent display, a polished bronze plaque near the food court with an inscription that read, "To those who stood not in violence, but in dignity, may we all learn the strength of honor." Beside it, a video loop played on a silent screen, showing clips from the confrontation, community responses, and youth testimonials. The footage became part of a school field trip route. 6th graders sat cross-legged on the tile where Harold once lay bruised, now listening to recorded stories from the men who changed the mall's legacy. Sarah also implemented a respect shift initiative, training security staff to better recognize generational tensions and create bridge-building moments between mall youth and elders. It didn't erase conflict overnight, but it changed the atmosphere. It made everyone aware. The mall wasn't just a commercial space anymore. It became a place of restoration. The quiet life Harold had once clung to was gone, but what replaced it wasn't chaos, it was renewal. He now had a routine more vibrant than ever. Monday coffee with Tommy at the cafe near City Hall. Tuesday, mentoring. Wednesday dinner with Elena. Thursday group sessions with the boys. Friday morning walks with Father Miguel, where they'd reflect on the past without drowning in it. One Friday morning, as they strolled beneath blooming dogwoods, Miguel turned to him and asked, "Do you ever miss the quiet?" Harold smiled. "Sometimes. But it wasn't peace. It was just silence." "You're not afraid of burning out?" Harold looked ahead. "When you've walked through war, you realize the only thing worse than dying with purpose is living without one." Miguel didn't respond. He just nodded once, with quiet reverence. For Danny, change didn't come all at once. But it came. At first he struggled with guilt, waking up at night sweating, hearing Harold's body hitting the yunt tile again and again in his mind. He admitted it to Miguel in one session. "It's like I keep tripping over the same regret." Miguel responded, "Then use it to build something. Regret is a blade. You can let it bleed you or sharpen it into something useful." So Danny started helping outside the program. He picked up extra shifts, bought groceries when he could for his mom. He wrote a letter of apology to every veteran mentor, not generic but detailed, honest. He even started tutoring a younger kid at school. When asked why, he said, "Because if someone had done that for me 2 years ago, I wouldn't have needed to hurt anybody." By summer's end, Danny had earned enough trust to be named a peer mentor in the program. It was Harold's idea. "He's not perfect," Harold told the board, "but neither were we." And when Harold handed Danny the first official Next Detail t-shirt, navy blue, with a subtle marine emblem stitched on the sleeve, the boy's hands shook. "Are you sure?" he whispered. Harold didn't hesitate. "Earn it again tomorrow." Eleanor watched all of this unfold with cautious hope. She still worried about her father's energy, his heart, his refusal to say no to anyone who knocked, but she also saw him smiling more, saw the way he stood straighter. The spark that had dulled over the years was back, burning even brighter than before. And more than that, she found her own growth. She started volunteering as the program's wellness liaison, hosting monthly family sessions for parents of mentees. She spoke with mothers, uncles, guardians, offering insight, empathy, and solidarity. In time, she let go of her need to protect Harold from the world and began helping him carry it. One night, she and Harold sat on his porch after dinner. The cicadas hummed. Her head rested gently against his shoulder. "You know," she said softly, "I spent years thinking I had to pull you out of your past." He chuckled. "I spent years thinking I had to hide it." She looked up at him. "But it's not the past anymore, is it?" "No," he said. "Now it's a gift." Word of the Next Detail spread beyond their small town. A neighboring city launched a pilot with Vietnam veterans, another with female vets paired with teenage girls from shelters. A small group of Iraq War veterans began coordinating mentorships through community colleges. The structure was simple: dignity, proximity, accountability, and time. The results were staggering: fewer school fights, better attendance, more parent engagement, fewer arrests. Harold and his team were invited to speak at a statewide youth summit. It was there, on a modest stage inside a high school gym, that Harold gave his shortest and most remembered speech. He walked to the mic, looked at the sea of teenage faces, took off his cap and said, "You don't have to be broken to be dangerous, but you do have to be brave to change. Thank you for being brave." It had been nearly 6 months since the attack. The bruises on Harold's body were long gone. The echo of humiliation faded. But in their place stood something stronger: legacy. On the anniversary of the Korean armistice, the town unveiled a mural on the side of the community center. 5 weathered hands holding up a folded flag, each marked with the initials of Tank, Razor, Tommy, Miguel, and Harold. Below it read, "The old guard still stands." The event drew hundreds: veterans, students, families, city leaders. even Ray Cooper, who had since taken a role as community outreach liaison between the police department and the next detail. Danny stood beside Harold during the unveiling, hand over heart, expression unreadable, until he leaned close and said, "I don't want to be remembered for what I did. I want to be remembered for what I became." Harold squeezed his shoulder. "Then keep becoming." And just before the sun dipped behind the mural, the 5 men stood side by side again, shoulders brushing, chests proud, eyes forward. The battlefields of their youth were far behind them, but their mission, it had only just begun. 3 months later, on a breezy October afternoon, the golden leaves danced across the streets of Westfield like tiny medals pinned to the ground. By wind, the sharp heat of summer had mellowed, and the air carried that particular kind of crispness that makes people feel nostalgic, reflective, ready for the shift in season, not just outside, but inside themselves. For Harold "Gunny" Sullivan, this time of year had always made him quiet. It reminded him of the way Korea felt in late autumn, when frost kissed your rifle barrel and death could arrive on the whisper of wind. But this year, as he stood outside the community center surrounded by laughing teenagers and the rich smell of grilled burgers, he wasn't thinking about war. He was thinking about growth. Danny Rodriguez stood a few feet away under the shade of a red maple, his posture more relaxed now, chatting with a boy from the newest mentorship group. His laugh wasn't forced anymore. He didn't check his phone. Every few seconds, he looked present, grounded. It was a small thing, but Harold, who had watched young men unravel under pressure, knew the signs of someone beginning to knit themselves back together. "Looks like he's adjusting," said a voice to Harold's left. Tank Williams handed him a paper plate stacked with 2 hot dogs, a scoop of potato salad, and a slice of watermelon. His grip was steady, his stance firm, even if he had to lean a little more on his cane these days. "He's doing more than adjusting," Harold said, accepting the plate. "He's anchoring." Tank chuckled. "Careful, old man. You're starting to sound like Miguel." "I've been hanging around him too long," Harold replied, eyes twinkling. "He's wearing off on all of us." Father Miguel himself emerged from the community center moments later, carrying a tray of iced tea and lemonade, flanked by 2 teenage girls who had joined the new wave of mentees. The next detail had grown beyond its original framework. It now included girls from local shelters, foster homes, and alternative education programs. Veterans from other branches had signed up to help. Harold had even worked with Tommy to set up a scholarship fund, quietly, anonymously, for participants who completed the full 12-week cycle and wanted to pursue college, trade school, or even the military. Tommy, as usual, had taken care of the logistics. "You know," he said now, stepping up beside Harold with his sleeves rolled and a Bluetooth headset clipped to his ear. "I've been running 3 companies for 40 years, and I've never seen an ROI like this." Harold smirked. "Since when do you talk about kids like spreadsheets?" Tommy tapped the headset. "Since some of these kids started asking me about internships, Harold. One of them wants to shadow my site foreman next semester. One wants to learn drone surveying. They care now, that's profit, whether I make a cent or not." Razor appeared behind them, as quietly as ever. He had changed the least in appearance. His expression remained carved from stone, his eyes always scanning, always calculating. But even Razor had softened in ways only those close to him could see. "I overheard one of the boys tell another that being around us feels like getting adopted by the Avengers," he said, with a dry grin. Tank laughed so hard he had to steady himself on the picnic table. "We've got more metal in our joints than Iron Man, that's for sure." Elena arrived a few minutes later with a clipboard and her ever-practical sneakers, her hair tied, back and sleeves pushed up. She walked over to Harold and gave his shoulder a squeeze. "Dad, they're asking if you'll say a few words before the award ceremony." Harold sighed. "I should have known there'd be speeches." You're the reason they're all here. No, he said, shaking his head. We're the reason. Still, he walked up to the small podium set beneath the banner that read, Next Detail, Fall Gathering, Progress, Pride, Purpose. A simple Bluetooth mic was clipped to the collar of his pressed flannel shirt. He looked out at the group, young faces, old faces, skeptical faces, hopeful ones. Then he spoke. I'm not much for long speeches. I was taught to say what needs to be said and move on, so I'll do that now. When I was your age, well, most of your ages, I was half a world away carrying a rifle, wondering if I'd see sunrise. I came back with scars, not all of them on the outside. For a long time, I thought silence was the way to survive. Don't talk about what you saw. Don't talk about who you lost. Just get a job, start a family, keep your head down. But silence didn't save me. It only delayed the healing. It took a moment, a hard one, to remind me that our stories matter, that what we do with our pain matters. Some of you came here because you made mistakes. Some of you came because someone believed in you. Some of you came because this was the only place you could go where someone would look you in the eye and see you. Well, I see you. We all do. And if you keep showing up, keep learning, and keep lifting the people around you, then I promise your past doesn't define you. But what you do next does. He stepped away to a standing ovation. As the ceremony continued, teens received certificates, high fives, and handshakes from mentors. One girl was granted a full-ride scholarship to a trade school. Another received tools donated by Tommy's company. A third had just enrolled in the Navy Reserves and was shipping off in January. Each one came to Harold after, shaking his hand with both of theirs. Some hugged him. Some just whispered, "Thank you." And when Danny took the mic to close the ceremony, he paused for a long moment before speaking. I used to think heroes wore capes, that they were larger than life. But now I know, sometimes heroes wear hearing aids and walk slower than I do. And sometimes they let you cry on their shoulder and still call you son the next day. I've spent most of my life looking for someone to follow. I found 5. I'll spend the rest of it trying to be someone worth following too. That night, as the crowd thinned and folding chairs were stacked, Harold sat on a bench under the fading sun. Danny sat beside him. You did good up there, Harold said. Danny shrugged. I was nervous. Being nervous means you care. They sat in silence a moment longer. You know, Danny said, I've been thinking about something. Oh? I think I want to go to college, maybe study social work or counseling, help kids like me before they go down the same road. Harold smiled. That sounds like purpose to me. Danny looked over. You really think I can pull it off? Harold gave him a look. I think you already have. At that moment, Elena called from across the lot. Dad, you promised to come early tomorrow for your flu shot. Don't pretend you forgot. Harold groaned, standing slowly. No rest for the redeemed. Danny laughed. Harold turned to him one last time before walking away. Keep going, and when you feel like you're slipping, remember we've got your 6. Danny nodded, always gunny. And so the old Marine walked into the dusk, not alone, not diminished, but lifted by the legacy he was building, one boy, one story, one lesson at a time. Redemption wasn't about erasing the past, it was about planting something stronger in its place. 1 year to the day after Harold Gunny Sullivan had been assaulted in Westfield Mall, the town held a ceremony that no one had expected to become a tradition. What began as an act of cruelty had, over time, transformed into a symbol of dignity, reconciliation, and renewal. The people of Westfield didn't call it an anniversary. They called it Honor Day. By 9 a.m., folding chairs stretched across the lawn behind the community center. American flags waved gently in the autumn breeze, arranged beside banners displaying The next detail emblem, a simple eagle silhouette, wings outstretched over 5 ascending stars. Harold sat near the front in his marine dress blues, his cap neatly in his lap. His posture was ramrod straight despite his 86 years. Tank Williams sat to his right, cane resting between his knees. Razor Morrison, slightly paler these days, but just as sharp-eyed, leaned back with his arms crossed, observing every detail like a sentry. Tommy Chen stood by the podium, adjusting the mic and checking a clipboard with the precision of a man who'd built empires. Father Miguel, serene as ever, had arrived early to bless the gathering. Behind them, rows of young men and women, graduates of the next detail program, waited in neat lines, dressed in matching navy shirts and khaki slacks. Their presence wasn't for show, it was testament. And at the very back of the crowd, standing, in his dress shirt and black slacks, was Danny Rodriguez. He'd spent the last 12 months growing, failing, learning, and trying again. He was no longer the boy who had looked at Harold Sullivan and seen a target. He was now a youth mentor, a community leader, and a freshman at the local university, with a double major in psychology and social services. More importantly, he was trusted. The crowd quieted as the mayor stepped up to the podium and welcomed everyone. His voice was ceremonial, respectful, but it was what came next that made the crowd lean forward. Today, we do more than remember, we build. The mayor gestured toward the unveiling, where a large cloth draped an object near the stage. 1 year ago, 5 veterans stood together not in anger, but in unity. They reminded this town what service looks like, what courage and patience and love of country really mean. He stepped back. Elena Sullivan, Harold's daughter, walked up. Now 53, Elena had grown into her own quiet form of leadership. Her background in nursing, her years caring for Harold, and her deep involvement in the next detail had made her a steady, practical force in the program's foundation. Today, however, her voice trembled slightly as she took the mic. When I was growing up, she began, I thought my father's silence about the war was about shame, or pain, or something he couldn't face. But I understand now it was about protection. He wasn't hiding from us, he was shielding us, but when he stood up again after being knocked down, he let us in, and through that he let hundreds of others in too. She looked toward her father. He gave her a faint nod. We have a tradition in this family. We don't say, I love you with words. We say it by showing up. So, Dad, this is for you. She pulled the cloth back from the monument. The sculpture beneath was bronze, cast in remarkable detail. It depicted 5 older veterans standing shoulder to shoulder in uniform, with one of them, clearly Harold, extending a hand downward toward a teenage boy seated on the ground, holding a tattered cap. The veterans weren't imposing. They were inviting. Behind them rose a subtle silhouette of the American flag, formed from ascending plaques listing the names of each teen who had completed the next detail program in its first year. Gasps rippled through the crowd, then silence, then applause, thunderous, unrelenting applause. Harold stood slowly, as if pushed upward by the weight of emotion alone. He stepped forward and placed a single white rose at the foot of the sculpture. Then he turned, facing the crowd. You all know me, he said, no mic, just the weight of his voice, but I want you to know why I'm still standing. He looked out and locked eyes with Danny. I'm standing because a boy who made a mistake didn't run from it. I'm standing because 4 brothers didn't hesitate when I needed them. I'm standing because a daughter saw me, not just as her father, but as a man still worth believing in. He let the words settle. This uniform doesn't make me brave. Showing up does. And each of you here today, you've shown up for your community, for your families, for yourselves. That's what legacy is. Danny wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Elena stepped forward and whispered something to Harold, then returned to her seat. A moment later, the ceremony continued. The next detail annual awards followed, with Tank presenting the new Iron Backbone Award, named in his honor, to a young mentee who had helped break up a schoolyard fight without throwing a single punch. Razor gave a quiet, heartfelt address about loss, revealing to the crowd, many for the first time, that he had lost a son in Iraq. His voice never wavered, but when he finished, 3 of the teenagers in the audience stood and saluted him without instruction. Tommy spoke last. He announced a 10-year fund guaranteeing all next detail graduates free enrollment in a trade skill of their choice, from welding to coding to construction management. "I'm not investing in charity," Tommy said. "I'm investing in infrastructure. You are the structure." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and golden light kissed the statue, Harold, Tank, Razor, Tommy and Miguel sat at a picnic table near the edge of the field. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. "Think this thing's gonna last?" Razor asked, flicking ash from his cigar. Tank raised his water bottle in salute. "It already has." Tommy leaned back. "We're not just building bridges. We're restoring blueprints." Miguel, hands folded over his cane, smiled, and laying down legacy. Harold watched the kids playing frisbee in the distance, Danny among them, laughing freely, diving for the disc like he had nothing to prove. He turned to the others. "I used to think our last mission ended with the war," he said. "But it didn't. It just changed theaters." They all nodded. 2 weeks later, Harold stood again, but this time not in his uniform. He was wearing a simple sweater and slacks, standing at the front of a church during the funeral of Private First Class Henry Skates Mathers, a name only a handful of people remembered. Skates had been the last surviving member of their original unit who hadn't stayed in contact. They'd lost touch after Vietnam. Tommy had tracked him down earlier that year, living in a care facility in Michigan. He passed peacefully in his sleep. Harold had insisted they bring him home. As he stood beside the casket, surrounded by old brothers and new mentees who had come to pay respects, Harold read from a note card. "We fought together once," he said, "but the war never told us what to do with our peace. Some of us made it home and found ways to live. Some didn't. But today we carry each other, not just through the fighting, but after. That's the real bond. That's what lasts." Spring came early the next year, and with it a new generation of mentees walked through the doors of the community center, many of them too young to know the details of what had happened at the mall nearly 2 years prior. They only knew that there was a program led by old men with straight backs and stories that could make your heart break and mend. Harold still came every Tuesday. He didn't always talk. Sometimes he just sat at the back of the room, hands resting on his cane, watching the teens talk through their fears, anger, hopes, dreams. And when a new boy, nervous and twitchy, asked if Harold had really been famous or something, Harold smiled and said, "No, son, I just stood back up." The boy didn't quite understand yet, but one day he would. Years later, when Harold passed at the age of 92, peacefully in his sleep, the town declared a day of mourning. Not a day of sadness, but a day of standing. The town's school district cancelled classes that day, not for grief, but for service. Every next detail graduate, no matter where they were in the country, received the same message in their inbox. Today, we stand. In honor, in gratitude, in legacy. Wherever you are, show up. Someone needs you to. And they did. Across barbershops, school gyms, factories and city halls, young men and women who had once been broken, once afraid, once unseen, showed up. They taught, they listened, they helped, they healed. And in doing so, they extended Harold Sullivan's final mission beyond any battlefield he'd ever known. Because a warrior's greatest weapon isn't firepower, it's memory, it's compassion. It's showing up, every time, forever. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.